Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be chatting spoilers for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter or Secret Project 3. And I know that I have a lot of thoughts and I have a lot to say about it. So I kind of want to just jump immediately right into it. And we'll just start overall. What are everyone's overall thoughts? Petrick, I'll let you start and then we'll kind of go around the rectangle here.
Okay, it is my favorite secret novel out of all the secret novels so far. I, I mean, before I started this one, I already had very high expectations entering into it. I knew like anime would be one of the major inspiration behind it, and it was. It was also one of my favorite anime as I was growing up, Hikaru no Go, and then finding out that other anime like Kimi no Nawa and then video game like Final Fantasy X is also a major inspiration for this one. It was pretty much a knockout win for me. I love this one very much, and I think I'm not sure whether the fourth book will be able to top it or not. This is my favorite secret project from Sanderson.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This is my favorite secret project. This is my favorite thing he's done in quite a while, in my opinion. Um, I I don't know. I read this book in like 3 days, and like normally my reading lately has been like it's been taking me out way longer to finish a book, but I just could not put this one down because I just loved it so much. And like it also, especially hearing those inspirations, I kind of flipped to the back like halfway through the book and was reading his acknowledgments. And then I saw that Your Name was one of the inspirations, and I was like, okay, I can see that, and I love that. So that was another thing that I loved about it as well.
Roger, you look so serious right now. Like you're upset.
No, I'm just listening. It's my listening face. I just have RBF, I guess.
I was gonna say.
I really liked it. I don't know that I'd say it was my favorite. I like it and Tress probably equally for different reasons, because Tress is more just fun, and this one is a little bit more like serious and actiony and like moody and vibey, and I kind of liked it. Yeah, I think the world building was really cool. It was everything that I had hoped that Secret Project 2 would be, with cool world building, cool magic, interesting characters that I didn't get from that, I got from this. I don't know that I totally see the Final Fantasy X inspiration,
You don't see
but
it?
sure, no.
I saw it immediately. I told Sean, I was like, oh my gosh, this feels so related to Final Fantasy X. And then further in, I was like, oh my god, I could predict things in the book because of the 10 parallels. And then the acknowledgments, I was like, oh well, I felt less cool for noticing, because he's like, one of the biggest inspirations is Final Fantasy X. I was like, ah, darn.
I didn't see it at all, but maybe I was just looking for something more literal for him to be inspired by, kind of like he was in Secret Project 2, where it was very obviously like Jason Bourne or all of that kind of stuff.
Or the Princess Bride with
Yeah.
Tress. That makes
So I
sense.
liked
But
it a lot. I thought
overall,
it was really cool. And the color combination, when I got, because this one I read kind of slowly, but I've just been reading slowly, period, because I was moving. But when I got the physical copy and the color combination and watching like the colors around the page numbers changed based on the perspective, it's beautiful.
the presentation of the Secret Project was
Beautiful.
best. I think even if you
I don't know that I
don't
would say
love
the best, because I really liked watching the chapter headers and like the GIF progress from Tress. That was so cool.
Yeah. Somebody made on, I think, Reddit or something I saw, where they put all of the things growing, like a time lapse
so
of it. It is really cool because you don't really see it if you're flipping, obviously as you're reading, it does get bigger, but it's like those books where you flip and the images change. But I do like the present. I like all of the artwork in this one the most.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I have it in the background. It's so beautiful. Sophia, what were your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I really liked it too. I only knew the title, and I'd seen the cover maybe once or twice before I went into it, so I didn't know what any of the inspirations were. But from the title in particular, I had extrapolated that it was going to be some sort of Japanese inspiration in there, which I was super excited for. And then it was there, and I was like, yay! And then the artwork and art being a part of the story as well, I just really enjoyed that. So yeah, I couldn't. I think I do like it better than Tress slightly. But I didn't get to read it as quickly as I wanted to because there was stuff going on in life. So I'm really looking forward to rereading it again when my physical copy arrives, so I can just bask in the gorgeousness of all of the illustrations.
Did
and the
you
colour.
read it digitally or did you listen to the audiobook?
I did a little bit of both. So I did a little bit of immersion reading, but I did that on my Kindle, which doesn't have the colours. So
Oh.
I had to keep kind of like when I was immersion reading, I had to keep swapping to looking at the ebook on my phone to see the colours of the pictures. So I think it was just quite an interrupted reading experience.
That's
I
what I
wanna,
did.
yeah, I want to do it again with the actual physical copy.
Sarah over there with
Sorry.
her book immediately.
Right?
Well, I have it too. I could bring it out and put it in the background if you want, because I read half of it.
Jealous. I also read it on my Kindle, but I have the Fire tablet that I use as my Kindle, so I did get it in full color, which is literally the only reason I bought the tablet instead of the regular Kindle, because I needed everything in color. But I'm kind of there with Roger, where it's really hard to say if this is my favorite or if Tress was, because they're so different, and I love them both for different reasons. But like with the Final Fantasy X inspiration, I mean, I've played through it probably 7 or 8 times in my life, so definitely hit that like right away. And
How am I not
loved it.
getting
I
it?
think
I've
his
played that game so many
use of
times,
doing romance,
and I don't get the parallels at all.
That's funny.
I
so
actually, instead of doing a dedicated review on my main channel, I kind of wanted to do a video doing the parallels between it and 10
Oh yeah.
over on the side channel, because it just
I'll look
all
forward
those
to it, because
little
apparently I'm too stupid.
you're not no you're not even a little. I think it's just because the worlds are completely different and the magic is not necessarily similar, and that's a big thing for you as a
And Titus
reader?
plus paint, it does not equal painter.
no Titus
Yumi does
no
not
no
equal Yuna.
the characters are not alike at all. That's not, but I can't get into it really here because it's kind of it would be a spoiler for the game. Not everybody would know. But anyway, I think similar to what Jesse said, it's hard to not have, because I did feel that there were parallels. It was hard to not, I didn't want to remove that nostalgia I have. And I've always wanted, I've said so many times that I want to see something similar to Final Fantasy X in book form. And this is the closest thing I've ever gotten, but it was still really unique and its own thing. And something I've struggled with when it comes to books that have inspiration is if the inspiration is too similar, it doesn't feel like the book stands on its own. It doesn't feel distinct. It just feels like a version of fan fiction, or I would rather just go back to the original rather than have that story. So for me, this was a really nice combination of clearly a lot of things he's inspired by, while still having the signature Sanderson magic and world, and having those things feel very much Cosmere, or feeling very much like his work. So for me, it was kind of a perfect combination of so many things that I love, which is why it's been my favorite secret project. I also just think the world is really interesting. I think the magic is really cool. I thought that the tone was sweet. I'm still kind of convinced that these are all going to end up being basically kind of young adult a little bit, because when you think about Stormlight Archive, I would say this doesn't feel nearly as adult. I don't think it feels necessarily adult anyway, but it was cute and it was sweet, but it was cute and sweet in a different way than Tress, while still being really cool and moody, like what you were saying, Roger. It just had so many things. Plus, I think the sci fantasy blend, we don't see that as often in fantasy in general. We see so much more fantasy, or we see sci-fi with not as much overlap. And so I liked that the characters they lived in these apartments and they had basically televisions and things like that. It was kind of cool to see all these different combinations of things. So I loved it. I loved it very much. I want to get into some specifics. So we'll start with the characters. You can mention side characters too, but how did you feel? Did you feel connected to the characters? Did you feel like you wanted more from them? Was it a highlight of the book? Do you have criticisms? What are your thoughts? And I'll let Sophia start on this one, and we'll go down to Roger from there.
Okay, yeah, I liked both the main characters, Painter and Yumi, and I particularly liked kind of the development of their relationship. Because I mean, not that any of us would ever be in this situation, obviously, but I could just imagine how that would just be like, not only am I in a completely different place, but I'm also in a completely different body that is also a different gender than mine. Like, just so much going on, and their ways of dealing with it were just so totally different. And yeah, I found them fascinating as characters. And then I particularly liked the side characters on Painter's World, or on Painter's World, you know what I mean, in Painter's place of living, than I did in Yumi's. Particularly like it's almost a little bit like a found family type vibe in Painter's World. So yeah, I liked them. I wasn't surprised to like them, with the exception of Frugal Wizard. I've liked all of the characters I've read from Sanderson. So
Roger, what do you think?
I would agree. I really like Yumi and Painter and their dynamic, and I really liked the nods to like classic anime scenes, like the silly friggin' hot springs and all of that kind of stuff that always goes on. But he kind of removed the like weird pervy undertones that those scenes tend to have in anime. Like, it could have gone very Ranma one half, and we did not go there, and I was very thankful for it. Because it kept the kind of sweeter dynamic where you got to think of them more as people and less as like caricatures, like you kind of sometimes get in some animes. Yeah, and I think similarly to Sophia, the side characters in Painter's POVs were more compelling to me, and seeing their growing dynamics with Yumi and trying to figure out what happened and why they were kind of like ignoring Painter since they all used to be friends, and kind of having that minor mystery within the bigger mystery. I thought it was just really compelling.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I really liked both of them. It did take me a little bit longer to connect to Painter, just because he was kind of like, I don't know, he felt pretty moody, and I was like, why are you being like this? But I did appreciate that when he did find himself in Yumi's body, he was just like, okay, I'll do whatever. Like, he was so chill about it. He didn't like be like, no, I can't do this. He didn't resist at all, really. He just was like, okay, let's get to work. So but I really liked both of them.
He had a little bit of sass.
Sass.
Like, this stacking rocks is pointless. What do you think, Patrick?
I absolutely love Yumi and Painter as well. I think I don't know if this is common opinion or not, but I do think that Sanderson is one of the best in adult fantasy when it comes to writing romance. Yeah, I know, and I know that. Look, that's just my honest opinion, okay? But romance is a very tricky thing in my fantasy books, in my opinion. It is one of the things that usually keep pushing me away from liking a book. But when it comes to Sanderson, like in Warbreaker, in Mistborn, I think, and then this one, I love these couples, and also Mistborn Era 2 as well. All of these are some of my favorite couples in fantasy, and I think the way I see it is that Sanderson always makes sure that whether it's Yumi and Painter, all the other couples I mentioned, this relationship happen through understanding and sacrifice, and I think these are really key concept that's needed in any relationship. Without this understanding and trust, relationship crumbles. And I think this is why I really love Yumi and Painter. We see them develop from, well, completely hating each other and then up to their budding relationship. I think it is amazingly well done. I love their characters' development, and also I felt like I could understand the struggle they dealt with.
Yeah, I agree very much with that. Jesse, I'll let you go before I hop on this.
I also agree with you, Patrick. So I'm not a big romance reader, and Sanderson's romance is like the kind of romance I like seeing, because it's very much like built on communication and struggle and sacrifice and time. And, not like, I love you together. Like, I really actually like how he does it. And what's funny is I know that that's one of the like main criticisms of Sanderson's romance, is that he's not a real good romance writer. I disagree. I like it. But again, that's like my kind of romance, is not being a romance reader. But
I think people say that because he never really writes the chemistry between people.
He doesn't write the sexual tension.
Yeah. I will. Yeah. But I don't know. It's not like something for me that's like make or break it when reading romance and like in my fantasy. But I loved the side characters. I loved the side characters in Painter's World, but I actually got to like the ones in Yumi's world as well, especially as we went along. Because at first I'm like, they're just there, they're cardboard cutouts. Like, what is going on? And then I was like, oh wait, I actually am liking these people. Like, what is going on? I'm getting it now. But I thought that they were really well done as well, especially what was her name? The Guardian.
Leone.
Yeah, I liked her.
I think it took some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of an understanding of what, but I think the familiarity with Sanderson, his worlds, how he reveals things to you, how he reveals characters, is there is almost always something beneath the surface with the characters that are initially unlikable. So I kind of kept waiting for more elaboration of this character. I did like too that with the side characters, even Tojin, how initially it's like, oh, he just like likes to flex his muscles and stuff like that. But then when you see that it's very much a passion of his, it's something that it's described as he's almost nerdy about it and everything. I liked that too, that we're kind of taking this stereotypical big macho character and we're actually like, no, this is just as much for anyone else a thing that it's like a hobby or something they're really interested in, they care a lot about. So I like that we got to see that even with the side characters, that they were fleshed out, but at the same time not removing the very realistic way in which people are quick to make certain judgments and things like that. Because I think sometimes authors are so worried about making sure that nobody is seen in a bad light that it doesn't actually show how people tend to initially look at one another, and it doesn't end up feeling organic and real. It doesn't feel like how people actually think and act. It's not like there's ever anything awful about it. It was just like, of course he's like taking his shirt off right now. With the characters though, with Painter or Nikiro and Yumi in particular, we'll get to the romance more in just a second because I'm sure there's other thoughts on that. But I think with the themes for both of them, Yumi's was more obvious because she has such an extreme set of circumstances. So I feel like her breaking away and choosing something for herself, and even it doesn't have to be seen you don't have to compare it necessarily to specific parts of our own world, but I think certain views that you have growing up, whether they be political or social or religious, being able to kind of reflect on that and to see if you truly believe in those things, and recognizing that sometimes what you've been told your whole life is not what defines you. Like, you can choose for yourself, I think was a really big theme that a lot of people can relate to, regardless of whether, like I said, it's in her case, it's a religious thing, but it's a societal expectation and all those other things too. But having that understanding that her part in the world is so important. So she doesn't, even if when she wants to choose for herself, she thinks, but if I choose myself, other people are harmed. There's so much sacrifice involved with that and how unfair that is. So it made for it being very compelling, I think, with her character. But with Yumi, I think because his setting is more realistic and that kind of mundane nature of feeling like, am I even doing anything important? Does my job matter? Does my life matter? That sort of depression that people can fall into when they reflect on their life in that way. It took time to build. I think, Sarah, you were saying too, initially it just feels kind of moody. But then when you really dive a little bit more into his character, what is revealed is, I think, something a lot of us can relate to. And it's something that's a little quieter. It's not like an earth-shattering revelation. And it's not as big as Yumi's transformation necessarily. But it's not that it's not important. It's just something that I think so many people can connect with. So I actually found for a while, I'm like, Yumi's kind of, I felt bad by the end, but I was like, he's a little whiny. Like I felt like he was just a little dramatic and a little moody. But I knew there was going to be more there. I was just kind of waiting for that. And I also just think in general, that idea of being able to express yourself when in the past you've hurt people and everything, and that guilt that you carry, I thought it was done really realistically. But getting now to the romance, Patrick, you touched on a lot of the things that I really agreed with, but did you want to elaborate on your thoughts, or do you feel like you've kind of said everything you had to say about the romance itself?
I think I already did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah, what do you think?
I really liked it. I thought it was so just like cute and sweet, and I loved just like them taking the time to like get to know each other and like understand what each other was going through and like how they could help each other. I loved it. I thought it was so cute.
Roger, your continued listening face.
I mean, I agree. I think that their relationship and their budding relationship was really sweet. I do think that Sanderson doesn't hit the full balance for romance for me because there is no tension there whatsoever. It is just kind of like almost like a sapiosexual, like intellectual type romance, which is fine, but it doesn't necessarily get all of the, like, I'm not super duper invested in that relationship because I don't know. It just, even in Final Fantasy X, you get the scene where you get to see there is some chemistry, some tension there. And this one, it was a little lacking in that department, but I did think it was very cute and sweet. But it was definitely like very classic romance tropes to the nth degree of forced proximity, and like, it couldn't be much more forced proximity.
What do you think, Sophia?
Yeah, I like the romance too, and I think the lack of sexual tension isn't a problem for me because I'm demisexual, so I don't personally experience that anyway. So if it's missing from a romance, like if it's in a romance, that's fine. But if it's missing, for me, that's equally fine. But I really enjoyed the way that their relationship with each other developed, and I definitely saw the same as you, Sarah, the Your Name parallel there, which I really enjoyed that film. Funnily enough, the first time I ever saw that film was on a flight back from Japan, so it kind of put me back in that kind of place as well, which was really nice. And yeah, I think the fact that they, they're quite, they have their moments, but they're quite respectful of each other considering the situations they're in, like what you mentioned before about the hot springs, Roger. So I think it was a really interesting way to see their relationship develop, and I really enjoyed it.
What do you think, Jesse? I know you also kind of elaborated earlier.
I did, but I kind of agree. I think the one thing that for me I really liked, and it's just kind of such a small piece of it, was like at the beginning with the hot springs thing, it was awkward, right? Like, of course that'd be awkward.
Yeah.
By the end of it, it's like they almost became like desensitized to it in a way, or more comfortable with each other. And I think it's because I saw a review that had said something like, who would become less interested in seeing the person they're falling for naked? And I'm like, but honestly, isn't that kind of how a relationship work, where it's like it's not a big deal anymore? You're comfortable with that person, and it shows
they're not,
their
like,
level
staring at each other.
Right, like, but it shows like their level of comfort, where they're just like, all right, it's a thing, like whatever. And you can kind of see their growing comfort with that scene when they have to keep hitting the hot springs every time they're in her world. They become slowly more comfortable with each other, and I really liked that, just that growing level of comfort and seeing how they grow together as opposed to just the sexual tension.
Right. I think there is such an innocence to them that it's not that you can't have that chemistry and tension combined with that. It's just that I think so much of it for both of them was even just getting comfortable with another person. It kind of started there. And I think that's kind of, Patrick, another thing you were talking about too, is the sense of partnership between the two of them. They challenge each other, they push each other, but they respect each other. Maybe not at first, because Yumi's like, you were supposed to be a hero and you're telling untruths and things like that. But I'm kind of a sucker for the people that come from drastically different circumstances. And so they have to sort of learn to understand each other through those different circumstances. But the respect that they end up having for each other, I always thought was really lovely to see that build. And the way that when I say they push each other, they challenge each other, it's not like he was telling her your way is wrong, the way you think is wrong. It was kind of like, but what do you want for yourself? It's okay if you want to relax, if that's what you want to do. It's okay if you want to take some time for yourself. That's all right. And then for her, it was that encouraging of him to forgive himself and to become passionate in something again. So I just think that the way that they were encouraging to one another was really, really sweet. And I like seeing that in relationship building, regardless of whether it's romantic or not.
Yeah.
But I just thought they were so cute because there's those little moments too, like what the artwork is depicting behind all of us, where he just thinks like, I have everything I need right here, you know, like that.
Yeah.
Like, wow, just to feel that peace and that comfort. It was adorable. And I just think that her kind of recognizing too, when she spends time with him, how happy she is and how much she actually gets to embrace who she is with him. Not that he defines her, but that she feels comfortable being herself. And she's never really had that.
Yeah.
I just think it was cute. And you basically see them go on dates. We don't get that very much in fantasy worlds because usually the world is falling apart. This world was falling apart slowly, so they had time. It didn't feel, because that's a big thing in fantasy that I think irritates a lot of us, is when it feels like everything goes on pause, or the characters are like, I know the world is burning, but like, I love you so much, let's get it on. You know, you're like, we don't have the time for this right now, what are you doing? So I think that seeing them be able to have that, the time for that connection, I think if you actually took a step back and you looked at the amount of time that passed, it wasn't actually that much. But it felt like it was enough. And they were constantly together. Like Roger said, it's the forced proximity to the extreme.
We don't have to deal with the... And we don't have to deal with annoying third act conflict.
Yes. It just always got...
nuts.
The third act conflict was the potential of that machine taking over everything.
Yeah, like a fantasy one I'm fine with. A romantic one, no, I'm not.
And I do want to ask, because it's somewhat tied to the romance, but just in general, the ending. I'm curious your thoughts on the ending, because I can see it being kind of polarizing. I'll start by saying that because of the Final Fantasy X influences, I actually was thinking I do not want it to go a certain direction because it would feel way too similar to the end of Final Fantasy X. So I'm glad he went the way he did. And I thought it was very... maybe not subtly foreshadowed, but there was that foreshadowing with the shows, which I loved her reaction to watching TV. But I thought that was like the funniest thing. But we'll get to the humor in a second. But I did feel like when she missed that one episode and you overhear as the reader that there was a second extra episode and then it ultimately did end happy, was so fitting with the two epilogues. I thought that that was really adorable. And I liked the way in which, because she's so filled with investiture, it didn't really feel like a resurrection trope to me. It just felt like a choice that she made. And I gotta say, it would have felt almost too painful to have her, after now she finally gets to live her life when she's been living the same day over and over again. She finally chooses herself. She finally gets a chance. Well, she didn't even choose herself. She had moments of choosing herself, and then she saved everyone, so she's going to sacrifice herself. And then for her to die, like, you don't even get the chance to live life now. I would have feel like that would have just been mean, like pouring salt in the wound. So I thought the ending was lovely. But if you disagree, feel free to say so. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't dislike the ending. Jesse, I'll let you start with this.
No, I loved the ending. I'm right there with you. Like, I probably would have wanted to throw my Kindle across the room if it would have just ended at the one epilogue. Like, it would have been bittersweet, and y'all, I love a bittersweet ending so much in so many books, but this did not need to be bittersweet. It needed to be sweet. And I was happy with the ending. I absolutely loved it and didn't make me want to throw things. So
I still feel like I think bittersweet is still a good way to describe it. I think it would have been tragic otherwise, but bittersweet because she still lost everything she ever knew.
Yeah.
She's only known Painter's world or you know what I mean, Painter's whatever you want to call it. She's only known it for a bit, so she's still gonna have to get acclimated and make everybody understand
other people
not been bathing with her brother the whole time. You know, she's got to explain that now.
Well, yeah, that's got to be awkward to explain. That was what I was wondering. Like, how are we explaining the whole, like, just kidding, not my sister?
Yeah.
Like, how are they going to explain that? But also, I do agree. It was bittersweet in the way, like, and especially with the other side characters from her world, and them just kind of, it's like they're free, so it's happy, but also you're like, I kind of wanted to see some of them stay.
Her little servants that are the people that tended to her, and that's sad for them.
Right? So it was bittersweet. but in the way that I like it, and it was still happy enough. And yeah, if that would have just ended with the one riots.
What do you think, Sophia? Would you have rioted, or did you
No,
actually wish?
I agree. Especially with how much of a romantic plot the story had, it would have been weird to not have that HEA ending. And I was worried for a minute there. I was like, Sanderson, where are you going with this? Because this is not okay. Fix it now. And then he did. So it was okay.
Also, we've been through a lot. We're not talking Cosmere spoilers yet, but end of Mistborn Era 1, pretty much everybody's backstories in Stormlight. Like, I need something happy and cute. Which technically, you know, Tress, I feel like, was a sweeter story and stuff. But I mean, he's put us through it.
Yeah. I think he has to give us this because I have a very strong feeling that we're not going to get as much happiness next year.
At the end of Stormlight 5, I'm so scared.
No. I'm scared too.
Roger, your thoughts?
For me, it's definitely writing the fine line between being a little bit cheesy in the ending, because I don't know, it just felt like, oh, she could just choose to stay. I was like, okay, sure, I guess. But like when other characters have been in like similar things, they weren't able to just choose to be alive. Like there was lots of things that they had to do in order to kind of come back from that place that Yumi didn't necessarily have to do. But I also liked that it was sweet and cute. So like, I don't know. I haven't totally decided on like where I've settled with it, because it's definitely like on that line between like it was kind of convenient that she got to stay, but also I think I would have been mad if she didn't. So like,
yeah, I think that being so extremely highly invested. I don't know how many. I'd be curious to see other characters. If we had a chart of who's
like the
most...
DBZ power levels, she's a power level 10,000, and
yeah, so maybe it was like no big deal at all for her, as opposed to other planets and stuff too. Again, trying to avoid Cosmere spoilers, but I feel like they have to, like you're saying, they have to do way more to ensure that they. And she's not even. I don't think. Well, I don't want to say too much because we'll wait till we get to Cosmere spoilers, but we'll just leave it at. Yeah, it was not that difficult for her to choose to stay.
Void does kind of answer that slightly at one point, maybe, but maybe we'll come back to it when we do spoilers for the Cosmere.
Sarah,
I liked the ending.
Wow, we're not that.
I was like sure the entire time that it wasn't gonna end badly. Like there was at no point that I was like genuinely worried that she wasn't gonna come back. Just because I was like, it doesn't match like the vibe of what has been happening so far. Though I do love like heartbreaking endings, but I'm glad that it was happy and I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
And the last line I loved.
What's
the last line?
again?
The last line is beautiful.
Yeah, it was like this kiss for them was priceless or something.
Oh yeah.
Oh
So
my
cute.
god, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you have
so
you have that art, right? Accompany it.
Yes.
Yes. Amazing stuff, really.
How
So
it's
I asked,
probably not the best kiss ever, but
yeah. I
It
asked
is
Alia
pretty.
Chan, about that. I asked the artist. Apparently, that was the first kiss scene that she ever did.
Oh,
Yeah. And I think
Wow.
I think it turned out really well.
yeah, it's so cute.
Mm-mm. And yeah, I think for me, I loved it. I loved the ending. Like Sarah said, the majority of the book, I knew the ending would be like that. But there was one moment where I felt, as you said, Al, that this might be something like Final Fantasy X happening, and I was getting a bit scared of that. Yeah. But thankfully, it did not. And yeah, I love the ending. I think it was really fitting to the story and to the character story.
Well, that does lead into another thing I wanted to discuss, which is the predictability of this book. Not that predictability is always a bad thing, and not even just relating this to the end, because some of us here are saying like, well, we were pretty sure it was going to end happy, is what we expected, and we weren't really worried, that kind of thing. I got worried a little bit there for, like you just said. I was like, I don't want to be doing this. Let's not do this. But I did feel that because of the connections that I felt were there from Final Fantasy X, that there were certain plots that I was expecting. So the way that where they thought, well, we must be on different worlds, and then when they were talking about like, is it just a different time and things like that, I kind of saw some of those things likely coming, and I also kind of started to wonder about the world that she was in. So I think with the influences that this has, that contributed, but I don't know how predictable I would have found the book had I not had that knowledge ahead of time. So I'm curious if you all felt that that the book was predictable, or if you felt like it wasn't, and was it a bad thing, even if you did feel you could predict? Jesse, do you want to kick us off there?
I mean, I think if, like you said, if I wouldn't have played Final Fantasy X so many times, I wouldn't have picked up on a lot of the things. And I don't think that the fact that I thought, oh, well, this and probably this, like, ruined it for me at all. I didn't care because, like we said earlier, I'm a spoiler person anyway, so they've never bothered me. Just in general.
Yeah, we were talking about that when we were doing our Elantris chat, that you spoil yourself all the time.
I spoiler myself for things. Like, I actively look for spoilers. So predictability doesn't bother me. But that being said, I don't think that it was super predictable if you take that out of the equation. Because I think it made a lot of sense that this would be a different planet, a different time, a different something. So getting that revelation without any knowledge of the inspiration behind it, I think does, make for a really interesting story. And I don't think it's something that would be as easily picked up on without knowing the inspirations behind it.
Yeah. What do you think, Sophia?
I don't think it was predictable. As I said earlier, I didn't know what the inspirations were before reading it, but I didn't pick up on them anyway because I've never played Final Fantasy X or any Final Fantasy. I didn't know what that story was at all. I think, Patrick, did you mention it's based on a couple of manga as well? Like, so other than the Your Name parallel, which isn't really a plot parallel, it's just kind of like a trope thing. I don't have any frame of reference for any of those stories that wasn't predictable to me. The only thing was, knowing Sanderson the way I do, I thought that her being the star or the sun or whatever it was way too easy. I was like, nah, there's going to be more to it than that. This is Sanderson. He couldn't make it that simple. But other than that, I didn't find any of it predictable at all. So I guess that's a slightly different perspective from lots of you because you do know those stories and I didn't and don't.
There was a little part of me that was worried that somehow the both of them would save the day, but then they would return to wherever it was and then they would be separated, which would have been so sad. I would have been devastated if that's, but I was like, I hope that's not where we're going with this. I really need them to have something happy at the end. Roger, what did you think?
Yeah, I think I'm more in the boat with Sophia. I wouldn't say that I found it predictable, but I found that there was a lot of tropes and stuff and situations from like anime with like the random ramen house and stuff that were like familiar. So it was like comforting and familiar in that way. But I'd say like the direction that the plot went, I didn't necessarily find that I was like predicting things as it went.
Yeah. Kind of just along for the ride. What did
Yeah,
you
but I mean,
think?
I've played so many video games and seen so many anime with like the stupid bathhouse scene and like all that stuff. Like, so there was moments that were like very familiar, which is similar to predictable, but not quite the same.
I have to say on that point of there being these really similar scenes to a lot of, because I completely agree. And I think he did it in a way where he's not making fun of those, but rather like embracing them and having fun with them. But the scene where she is trying on the clothes and, we see a lot of characters in books at some point get their makeover scene basically. But for her, I thought the reason that scene wasn't just a cheesy, look, she's in a pretty dress now, is because what it meant to her and what it meant to her to have something that she got to decide on. She sees something and she likes something and it's like, it's okay to find, because so much of the book is about like artistry and the beauty and things. And so for her to just feel nice in this dress, and I don't know, I just thought it was such a lovely, but it is taking, like you're saying, a very familiar trope, and we're tying something, it's reminding us why those tropes mean so much or why we like those tropes, why we see them so often. It's not just there to be there. It's showing what makes them so cute or so special. So I do agree that there's definitely a lot of things like, oh, I'm expecting this to happen, but I didn't necessarily think it was a bad thing. Sorry, Sarah. I was about to go to you and then jumped in.
So I haven't played Final Fantasy X yet, so I didn't pick up on. I'm gonna play it. I didn't pick up on any of that, but I do think I wouldn't say it was predictable, but I feel like it like followed kind of a similar path to Your Name, like the kind of like big things that happened felt very similar. So I was like, that's why I was like, I don't think this is gonna end sad, but like I couldn't have predicted anything that like actually happened, like any details of anything. I was like shocked the whole way. So
I will add that some of the big reveals of how everything worked, he did not give you time to really predict exactly how things were going to play out, because things were happening and you're like, what? And then Hoyt's like, let me explain because I bet everybody's confused. And then you'd have something happen and be like, let me explain again. And so I think I don't know that anybody could really figure out exactly. I suppose maybe some people. But I do think it wasn't predictable in its specifics necessarily with the plot.
Because it was also like intentionally misleading with some of it, trying to explain how the plants worked, but like it was all a lie.
Right. Yeah. What did you think, Patrick?
I think for me, I'm familiar with the inspirations for this one, and I do find the story to be predictable, but that is not essentially a bad thing. Not in this, but not for this book anyway, because this is what I heard. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I have heard that when it comes to romance, if the genre itself is actually romance, then it must have a happy ending. If it's not a happy ending, it is no longer a romance; it is a tragedy. That's what I heard, okay, from romance readers. So having heard that this one would be a romance, the ending was already kind of predictable for me. And there was the story flow also, because I'm familiar with Hikaru no Go, Final Fantasy X, and also Your Name. So the story is kind of predictable, but again, what's surprising to me is the elements that were included in this one. Like seeing the ramen in Cosmere. That one alone already makes me super happy. And then I see Yumi wearing hanbok. Hanbok is a traditional Korean clothing. And then, the painter's world feeling similar to Tokyo and everything. Those were surprises that I did not expect. So on one part, it was predictable, but there were definitely some things that I did not predict. Like, how could I or anyone actually predict they would watch a TV show in Cosmere, right?
I
Yeah,
loved
something like
that.
that. I loved it too.
So there's so much to talk about with this particular book, but that does lead us nicely into the humor. And one of my favorite parts was when she watched and then she thought like, this must be my punishment from the spirits to not be able to know what happens next. Because capturing that feeling that so many of us have when we were like, what? It ends there? I have to wait a week? And that I was like, you were saying, Patrick, I wasn't expecting to relate to that with the Cosmere story. So I really love that. And it's not just TV, of course. It's just anything that you anticipate, any story you're excited for, any form of art that you're excited for. I think a lot of us have experienced that. And also just there's a couple of moments with the humor that I thought were maybe leaning into the cheese a lot. But there was also a couple of times where just Yumi is so endearing and innocent and has no idea. Like her pulling the sweatshirt up and trying to wear it like her clothing. Or I mentioned earlier when she tells Akane, I think her name is, like, oh, when we were bathing earlier, and she's like bowing to everybody all the time. They're like, okay. And she's just I just thought she was so adorable. So to see her be this fish out of water, but not people thinking of her in a mean way. I liked that they kind of took her under their wing. They looked out for her. I thought that was really nice. And they didn't see her being very different from them as a bad thing. They're just like, you're different. And it was treated as a good thing. I just think that the humor was very fitting to the story overall, because the story did have this comforting, loveliness to it. So I really liked the humor overall. I'm curious though, were there any total misses? Roger, I kind of want to start with you. I want to know what you thought of the humor in this one, since you've been talking about the tropes and things like that.
I didn't have a problem with the humor in this one. It wasn't like Wayne levels of just stupid frat boy humor to be frat boy humor. So like it definitely was writing that line like a lot of this book for me, where it was definitely like pretty over the top and cheesy for a lot of it if you like stop and look at some of it. So it's kind of like, but I fell on the side of like I enjoyed it. So but this one more than most, I could see kind of like it's writing a lot of fine lines for me where I'm like for me it was fine, but I could definitely see a lot of places where like this would turn people off.
I do like teenage cheesiness because if you're gonna do, I think Tress has a lot of humor in it as well, but it almost feels
it leans
like
even younger. It's like poop.
Yes.
And, like,
yeah. Where this one, like innocent teenage cheese, is I really like. I don't know if it's just kind of makes me feel nostalgic for when I used to teach and just interacting with kids, and I don't know, there's a certain feeling that you get with like their humor is so different because it's so often accidental. Or just like the awkwardness of being a person they've only been a person for such a short amount of time. And so there's something so innocent and pure about it that I feel like the humor in this matched that because these characters are young and they're just learning to navigate the world. So I liked it a lot. Sarah, what do you think?
I like the humor in this one because it wasn't too much. I never felt like it was too much because that was my problem with a lot of his other humor is that it just always felt like too much. But this one I felt like it was a good level and like it was spaced out enough that I wasn't like, okay, here's another joke again. So I enjoyed it.
It didn't interrupt the serious moments because that's not there's a pretty big thing in the Lost Metal that I'm like, why are we joking right now? But I don't want to say what it is. But yeah, I would completely agree that it never felt like it was, I think, kind of out of place is sort of what What do you think, Patrick?
I agree. I think I've spoken about this, but things get really bad for me if Sanderson goes too hard on the humor. Like in Frugal, it was insane in Frugal. Yeah, it's just too much. But on this one, I think it is well placed. And when there were existent in the narrative, they always work really nicely for me. I think it lightens the mood, it strengthens the relationship, and yeah, I love it.
It's almost like what you were saying, Al. It was like situational humor. The humor wasn't necessarily somebody being like, "Oh, penis." It was like her being over the top, like bowing and like that kind of stuff.
It was, what and I think hell? It wasn't as much of the Hoyd interjected humor.
Yes, yeah. Hoyd. I was thinking the same thing. He did not interject as much, and the bathhouse or the hot spring portion could have easily leaned into what Roger was just saying.
It could have easily, especially with Hoyd narrating. But we didn't get as much of that. But I really liked how the humor lightened it in the right places. But like you said, it wasn't like Frugal Wizard Overload or wasn't Wayne from Era 2. Like that wouldn't have worked in this, like at all.
Yeah.
But I liked the humor. I liked her learning to cook so much.
Just everything's way too salty.
Everything's terrible. Because if you ever actually eaten food from somebody that's literally learning to cook, it's the worst. And I'm teaching my 10-year-old daughter to cook, and she's like, I'm like, like it's real hard to stand back and just let them do it and learn the hard way. So.
Oh, and one of this is such a stupid thing to find funny, but when she has to take a shower and he's standing outside the door and she's like, what do I do with the shampoo? And he's like, you just put it in your hair. And then she's like, what's it for? He's like, it cleans it. And then she's like, what's the conditioner for? And he's like, it moisturizes. Like he realizes like, I don't really know what the conditioner's for. Just use it. And her not knowing like, do I just rinse now? And I thought it was cute.
It was that in the fair scene where she wins the stuffed animal.
Yes. So cute.
It was an adorable scene. Like it had just enough humor and just enough sweetness that I loved that.
And then she just gives it away.
To the little girl.
Yumi's I think Yumi's one of my new favorite Cosmere characters. Because she's like a little bit like if Syl was a person, in some ways. She's not maybe as like, I'm an amazing person and you should all worship me. She doesn't have that vibe, but I just mean like, she just kind of like the world exists around Yumi, and she's learning to navigate. I just love her. Sophia, what are your thoughts on the humor?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting how this is Hoyd's voice, and you can still tell that it's Hoyd's voice, but it's very different narrative style to Yumi. So I think that that's really cleverly done, and I agree. I don't think it was too. Wizard was way too much.
Did you mean to Tress?
Yes, sorry, to Tress.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if you meant within the context of the story.
Yeah,
it's
no,
different
no.
from her
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, no, sorry. I meant Tress. Sorry.
And I think it tied well to Hoyd almost has this parentalness to him sometimes, even though you're like, what are you doing? What are you up to? But I feel like with Tress, there was so much to it that was very much about Tress is the hero that we wish so often we were. She does the clever thing. She does the smart thing. She'll talk to people. Like there was like a pride in a way on his part toward Tress. And I feel like that was very fitting with Tress's story, where here it's very much like these two characters are just these young people, and like this kind of respect he has for two young people doing everything they can. And there is that sort of not quite a sure foot in the world. And I thought that it reflected that in his voice in a sense, and that sweetness toward the love that they had. It's funny because I feel like such a big thing that drew me in initially to this book was the world and the magic, and we haven't really touched on either of those things. So both world and magic, what are your thoughts on those? And then Sarah, I'll let you start with this one.
Okay, I liked both of them, like the world and the magic. I thought, especially in the beginning with like the floating plants and stuff, I was just like, this is so weird and cool. And like even the Hion, however you say that, the lines of whatever.
The Hion lines.
Yeah. Like that was super cool too. And just like picturing that in my head, I was just like, I've never come across something like that, I guess. So I found the world super interesting, as I do with most of Brandon Sanderson stuff. So I loved it. And I thought it was very cool to like discover more about each of them, even though not that it was fake, but like Yumi's side was like, doesn't really matter anymore, I guess. But I thought it was cool.
Yeah. How different the two were.
Yeah.
How they juxtaposed to each other, the warmth from one and the star, the light and things like that. I also thought the concept of the Hion lines, it was sort of hard for me to visualize. Patrick, you're talking about the inspiration of Tokyo. And I've never been, but just the sort of imagery that you'll see in artwork or any kind of like ambiance for Tokyo.
Yeah.
It's like if you took that and just made that the permanent feeling of their setting is kind of how I like with the lights from the kind of neon colors and things like that. So I thought it visually in my head looked so cool, and I would love, I mean, we all want, I think, adaptations for the Cosmere, but this one would be so cool to see on screen, like Arcane style with the really bright colors and everything. I think would be really cool. Patrick, what did you think of the world and the magic?
Love it so much. I think when it comes to Sanderson, I know that he hasn't written a lot of really Asian-inspired fantasy, but Emperor's Soul remains one of my favorite stories by him. And I think he always nails Asian-inspired stuff nicely. And I'm speaking as an Asian here. Okay. Okay. Just confirming. Okay. So when I heard that he will do another one with Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. And also, this is kind of random, but Yumi is almost similar to Yume, and Yume is a Japanese word for dream. So that name would be even more similar to Nightmare Painter. Okay. And yeah, when I found out that this one would be Asian inspired, that's also why my excitement increased so much. And I think there's having Alia Chen illustrating this is such a brilliant decision from Brandon Sanderson team. It is brilliant. Alia Chen is so fitting to the everything inside this book. And as you said, Elle, I mentioned earlier that Painter's World really reminded me of Tokyo. And that's really how I imagine it visually. Every time we are in Painter's World, I imagine Tokyo at night. And then when we in Yumi's world, I imagine kind of like Japan or Korea in the afternoon, but always afternoon, something like that. Everything about it is just so easy to visualize in my mind. And yeah, that's why it's clicking with me so much.
It's very vivid.
Yeah, very vivid.
Yeah. I could be mistaken. So if somebody knows otherwise, correct me. But did he do his mission in Korea?
Yeah, he did. He did.
And he speaks some, or did, right?
Yeah. So in the Emperor Soul, that Hanko system, the stamping system, yeah, he got it because he was on a mission to Korea.
We just before this did our Elantris and Emperor Soul chat.
Oh,
so
okay.
I feel kind of bad that's why I was like, I don't think I realized how much you loved Emperor Soul. Otherwise, I think you would have had some really interesting things to contribute, because we were very much like the Cosmere implications when we were talking about it. But anyway, Roger, let's kind of mix things up. Let's jump to you. What were your thoughts? Because I know you're big on worlds and magic, so I really want to know your thoughts on it.
The world was really cool. I don't think there was little to no magic for me in this one. There wasn't really a magic system per se. Sure, there was the Hion lines, but it was more just like a way to give atmosphere almost, it felt like, to have these two vivid colors so that you could have that neon Tokyo at night type feel. I thought the world was really cool because in this one, usually, like harkening back since we just talked about Elantris, we don't get to see like the history of that world, but in this one we kind of got both. We got to see some of what the world was like and what the world is like now, and so I thought that was really cool that we got to see both perspectives of it. But yeah, I mean, the world was awesome, but there was no magic.
The magic is, it's so funny that it's called Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, because that kind of is the magic, is the nightmare, like the way that they pull them into the art and things like that. But it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't really, like you're saying, I don't think it feels like a magic system. And I'm going to steal something you said with our Elantris discussion, where it feels more magical in a sense because it doesn't feel quite as scientific. So it's kind of got that vagueness to it. It doesn't feel like here are all the rules and limitations. In fact, I feel like it being so tied to art, it's fitting because, you know, a lot of times it's like there is no rule. There's not rules really when it comes to art. So I feel like they're not being as hard set rules and limitations with the magic here makes sense.
Even with the art being the magic, it wasn't really. It was just a way of them kind of putting their viewpoint on the nightmares. Because even towards the end, he wasn't trapping them anymore. He was just like turning them back. So like it didn't even still feel kind of like magic. It just felt like a conduit for him to use to get his mind in the right position to focus, to manipulate like the investiture / spirit energy that were these nightmares. It still didn't feel magic. He wasn't like necessarily doing things.
What do you think, Sophia?
I disagree. Sorry, Roger. I think it did feel magical to me, and yeah, he was manipulating the investiture, but that to me is magic in the Cosmere. And I really liked the world. I liked the way that they were so different from each other, and I enjoyed exploring both of them. I found some aspects of the magic were paralleling with something I don't want to say. I guess I'll come back to that when we talk Cosmere stuff. Yeah. But
I guess just to push back a little, usually when people are manipulating the investiture, it's to do something. This was just manipulation to manipulate. It wasn't doing anything, going anywhere. It was just helping people become themselves again.
It was
helping people become themselves.
Changing them from nightmare, creaturey, monstery things to either a painting or back to their own selves. So it is making a change.
It's so just not.
It's not to like do something. It's not like them manipulating the world in per se. It's just manipulating the investiture itself.
It's not like they're doing something and then they gain power from that. Is that what you're saying, Roger? Like they don't gain power and suddenly they can do like what the Knights Radiant do or something. It's kind of like it ends.
It's more external. Yeah, it's definitely more external than internal use of the magic. It's making a change to the world around them rather than making a change to themselves. But that's a little bit like Elantris as well.
Yeah, it just feels like it's not you know, we always I think fall back to Mistborn when it comes to like you ingest this and then you can do this and you have this cool power and these cool fights and it's certainly not like that.
It definitely is not magical powers. It's not magical powers.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not like superhero
Right.
vibes. Definitely not that.
No.
Right.
I think Yumi's power is very interesting and different as well. But again, I'll come back to that, I think.
And I
Jesse, what
think
did you think?
all of it is kind of, like the art, and like you said, like art is interpreted differently, and how like the art is the magic. And I like seeing how art is different on Yumi's area and Nightmare Painter's area, because they're both still art. Even though he thinks her art is weird and not artistic, and she's like, okay, well, why am I just painting bamboo? Like, it's both art, because art is seen differently by everybody. And I kind of get what you're saying, Roger. And I kind of agree, because while it isn't, like we said, like a set in stone, like magic system, I think especially in like Yumi's like location, it's using that creative ability to summon the spirits who then bend to your will and do something for you. So they are, at least in that area, doing something, as opposed to.
But they weren't really, right? Because it was all just in her mind and she wasn't actually doing anything.
True, but except for the one time that she did. But that it was magic.
It's what it was doing before the machine, though, right?
No, but I feel like we're almost in like era 2, right? Where it's become more technology, less magic, is my point. But it doesn't feel magic.
It doesn't feel as like you're controlling what's occurring.
Totally. And I think, where is it on the timeline? Is it closer with?
I need to check that, because some of the references to Roshar, it's got to be around that time, right?
Yeah.
Well, we have space travel, right? So it must be for our future.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking, like after era 2.
Yeah.
We also have Hoyd has design, so we know it takes place after.
I love that.
And he mentions, I don't want to have to lose my memories again or what, and I'm like, I know when that happens, so it's got to be after this other thing, we'll get to that with Cosmere spoilers. But one thing I want to add, and this is such a random specific thing, but the rock stacking, when I went to Iceland, there was an area, which I have no idea. I took a picture of the sign. It was just a lot of letters in a row. And people come and stack rocks. And it's like a thing that you do when you come by. And I think there's this, that explain the history of it and the, participate and stack your rock. And I think I don't think it's as simple as you make a wish, but you do. And I took a picture of all these stacked rocks. It's exactly what it looks like, is the artwork of these stacked rocks here. And it was so oddly specific and random to see that as like an art form, but then also the idea of the spirits are going to come, and if they're drawn to it, then they'll fulfill this request. It was so similarly tied that I was hoping to see some kind of reference to the rock stacking in where he got the idea for it, because I don't think he mentioned there, but I'm like, this is a thing to some degree. I'll have to see if I actually want to see if I can pull it up right now. I'm going to say Iceland rock stacking. Let's see. Because there's an area where it's not just a single, they're all over the place. Okay. I'm not sure if this particular one is actually Iceland, but I'll go ahead and share on the screen really quick. Like I said, it's encouraged for you to contribute your Iceland rock stacking. Isn't that kind of fun? That's exactly what Yumi does. So cool. I thought that was really cool. But I'm like, I wonder where that originated, the whole stacking
stones.
Stacking stones. Yeah, I don't know. But anywho, so was there anything else before we get into Cosmere spoilers? Was there anything else that anybody wanted to touch on, discuss, get everybody else's thoughts on, or do we want to jump now into Cosmere spoilers?
I will say, I think I had one minor criticism.
Okay.
Even though I loved it. And I think this was just me. I was expecting so much more from the reveal of how Painter betrayed his friends. I was like, that's it. And that was my that's it moment, because I'm like, well, it was crappy of him, but they hate him so much because of that.
Yeah.
Just have a conversation. That was my just talk moment. Like, just
Well, I
be
feel
like,
like-
yo, what's up?
I feel
And
like
I get it as
mean,
someone like who also has like some like social anxiety. Like, I get it. You don't want to talk to people. But I was like, just talk. Like, why was that the big deal? I thought it was going to be so much worse, I think.
You know, I don't disagree that it was kind of surprisingly small scale, but I also thought it was sort of fitting because their world is more like a contemporary, like our own world. So the things that hurt us are often these misunderstandings or these feelings of almost like a betrayal or things like that. Not betrayal in the sense of like, now this army is coming to attack our kingdom, right? Like it's never big like that, but
no. But I expected it to be like worse than I lied about getting into this program. I thought it was gonna be more, I don't know, sketchy or like still real world-y, but like more of a betrayal. Like he got them kicked out of something with a lie that he told, or something just like a little bigger.
I will say, not that this is really related to the criticism itself, but when you find out that the people that do make it are just basically like legacy kids, I was like, oh, this is weirdly fitting with things going on now. So, and then
I liked that reveal though, because that is very fitting with life.
I think a criticism, and we can go back to what you were saying if we want to get other thoughts on that specifically, but one criticism for me a little bit was just that I feel like some of everything that happens at the end, it happened so quick that I actually feel like I would have wanted a little more time with some of the reveals so that I had a little bit more, are we going to have some really sad stuff happen at the end when you start to be like, wait a sec. So if that's all everybody is, then if we're going to fix the problem, doesn't that mean everybody pretty much has to die because everybody already did die? You know, like I was worried about, and I think if we'd had more time, it could just be that once I got to a certain point, I just read and kept going. So it could just have been my own fault, but I actually feel like I would have liked a little bit more time with the reveals, I think. But I mean, I still really loved it. It's not like it was make or break, but were there any other criticisms anybody else wanted to mention or piggyback off of anything I or Jesse said? Not really.
I have one, but I don't know. I don't know if I really needed this story being told by Hoyd.
Oh.
Like, I don't think that added a whole lot for me to the story, so I didn't dislike it, but I don't know if it was necessary for me.
I actually think
we wouldn't have had explanations of anything if he wasn't there, though. He would have liked it to be vaguer because we wouldn't have understood what happened with the spirits or a lot of the things. Hoyd was the mechanism through which we got the answers of like what happened.
I guess, but even
it could have been incorporated through the characters had discovered it somehow, maybe.
Yeah, even those like explanations that he gave, it did just feel like, okay, like here's what happened, but like here's why, and I was like, okay, thanks.
I did feel a little bit too with what you're saying with Hoyd being the narrator that there were a couple of things where he was like, oh well, this I will not be able to explain just yet, but there's like a mystery for another. It actually kind of raised additional questions to some degree. Like I have awareness of what's going on with both of these characters. And you know, and I think one thing, Sarah, that we've talked about before with the Cosmere is sometimes we'll get into Cosmere spoilers, but sometimes you don't always need there to be like, by the way, I'm referencing something else. You know, you don't always need that. So I wonder, do you think that played a role in why you didn't really need Hoyd spoiling?
So.
Not spoiling, but discussing things?
Yeah, because like, I guess this isn't Cosmere spoilers, but him referencing other things in the Cosmere, especially in this book, I was like, that's not something that's necessary really to the story. So why is it there?
There was one in particular that was like, it's not like we're burning tin or something like that. And I'm like, it's such a just like, here, fans, here's a little tidbit about like, I know what that means.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The fans would be instantly like, okay, now you have to read Miss Bond to understand everything in this book.
Yes.
Yeah.
That, like almost gatekeeping, like, well, as a veteran fan of the Cosmere.
It's too much. It's too much.
At some point, it's like, just read it. Just read them all. And but I think Sophia and Patrick, you're the only ones that haven't mentioned. Did you have any Or I guess, Roger, I don't know if you mentioned any specific criticisms, but did you guys have any that you wanted to add in?
I think for me, I will have to piggyback what Sarah said. It is probably one of the moment here where Hoyt interject and started to explain everything at once. I think, yeah, I think that part felt a bit distracting to me. Like it was so intense, and then we have Hoyt. Hold on, I will explain everything now. But, okay.
Yeah.
And that's probably the only part where I gave my minor criticism, but the rest, I think it was really solid for me.
Roger, did you say anything specifically? I think you kind of mentioned things here and there as we were discussing other elements.
Well,
of the
for me,
book.
this one, I just understand more where people would criticize it because it was a little over the top in a lot of the spots. I think the Hoyt critique, I understand less more just because in context with Tress, because in Tress, his voice was so like in your face, and this one felt so much less of that. So like I didn't notice it as much having read that other book so similarly. But like I get what you're saying. Like if you don't like Hoyt's voice, or if you don't like direct explanation / references of the Cosmere, then you're not going to like his interjections. But if you like how things get explained to you, so you actually understand, then I'm sure you don't mind as much. But I can definitely see where if you're saying that it interrupted the flow of the story, I get what, I don't disagree. It didn't bug me, but I can see what you're saying.
Sophia, did you have anything?
Not particularly that hasn't already been mentioned. I think that because I didn't take ages to read it. I think I read it in like 4 or 5 days maybe, but that's quite long for me because usually I'd read it in like 1 or 2. So I actually was really grateful of the Hoyt interjections at the points that they came, because I was a bit like, okay, somebody needs to explain this to me, and then in comes Hoyt to explain it, and I was like, thank you. But I think it also does make sense, as Roger was just saying, that it's less Hoytish, this one, because he's not a player in the story this time, but he was in Tress. So but no, I don't have anything else really. No.
Shall we finally? Sophia, do you want to transition into Cosmere? Okay, so anybody that's watching that doesn't want Cosmere spoilers, this would be the time to stop watching. But we'll jump into Cosmere spoilers. Sophia, everything that you've wanted to say, you can get
I think
it's your time to shine.
I don't know if this is the same for everybody else, but for me, the spirits were really reminiscent of Spren. And I was like very much these are Spren, and that might have been the way that Hoyt was explaining them, because I think it's pretty clear that he's talking to he's telling the story to people on Roshar, probably Shin people most likely, from some of the clues that we're given. But yeah, that felt very Spren.
And
to me,
there's an interlude in Stormlight where they measure a spren and it makes them stop. And I feel like the art that Painter is utilizing to do that similar thing. But it does make me wonder then, if you were to replicate a spren more in their actual form, would that affect how they interact with measurements of them or something like that? Or is it not going to...
I think that interlude, it's less about them being measured and more about them being perceived and analysed in some way. So I think you're probably right. The fact of Painter painting them in whatever form it is that he chooses, and he often chooses bamboo, is a perception and recording of them, and therefore causes them to... So yeah, I hadn't thought of the nightmares that way, but I guess they are quite... realistically, they're the same kind of thing as the spirits in...
What do you say?
What do you think, Roger? Cosmere spoilers.
I think this one has for the Cosmere books that he has been doing, this one has the least like overt crossover-y type stuff. So I think if somebody wanted to like dip a toe, this one is probably a safer spot to do it, because it's not as like... Yes, you can draw parallels, and there are some things on like the higher orders of what we know about the Cosmere that can affect how you perceive Yumi, but really it's more about this almost like contemporary romancy type story than it is about like Cosmere per se. So like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I definitely think that I I would agree with that very much, where it felt like there was those little hints for the fans to be like, I get this. I'm proud of myself. There's that, but it's not like I feel there are certain books in the Cosmere where you almost need what Patrick was saying. It's almost required reading to read something else first. I
It's
think
not
the
like
Lost
Lost Metal where you need to go.
the Lost Metal is so like just and I do think you can still read Stormlight. You don't have to read other things necessarily, but there are a lot more now implications, or you're starting to see things in the Cosmere where they're discovering other parts of it. So I think that with this one, they do kind of stay more to themselves. The magic doesn't really require you to know other things. But I do like that the way they interact with spirits, it's kind of what you were saying, Sophia, where it feels very related to how they interact with Spren.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have also, Sophia, I know we talked about that specifically. Were there other things that were Cosmere specific that you were wanting to touch on? Because there were a couple of times where you're like, oh, I won't say anything yet.
Oh, I can't even remember what I said now, to be honest with you. That you're right, Roger. I don't think there's anywhere near as much in this one as we've started seeing in some of the more recent Cosmere books. But I think that some of it was more sort of subtle nods, and I thought it was really interesting. And I'm still not entirely sold on this. That the suggestion or the implication now is that Podium really did mess with Hoyd's memory in that scene in the Rhythm of War, and I don't know. I just don't trust Sanderson.
I agree.
So
I agree with you.
I'm still not convinced. I'm like, I will believe it when it's definitely 100% true in a Stormlight book. Then maybe I'll believe it. But
what
That's
do you mean by you don't believe?
Exactly what I said.
What do you mean you don't believe? So do you mean like you don't think he actually lost his memories and he's just pretending, or you feel like?
No, I feel like he's referring to something else.
Yep.
I feel like he's referring to something that we haven't seen yet.
So you think that reference is not in? So you think he's lost his memories multiple times?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he became an idiot in Tress. Like, why
yeah,
not?
exactly, right? Yeah.
Oh, I see. Is that him? Well, I guess it's kind of him, like, sort of. He did become really stupid, but I'm like, is he losing his memory? Because you're right that it could just be Sanderson being tricky, but now. Because in my head, I was like, "Oh, it's referencing that." So then,
that's what I thought at first too. But then I was like,
it made me wonder if this took place after Stormlight 5, and then because even the way they interact with Spren, I'm like, is this telling us something about how we're gonna see, or how they interact with spirits? Is this giving us hints of what is going to occur between mankind on Roshar and Spren? Like, I just don't know.
Yeah, I think this is very far future. I definitely read it as being very far future, like way ahead of, maybe around the same time as Tress, but otherwise way ahead in terms of time of anything else that we've seen in the Cosmere.
So you, in that case, it could be referencing his memories, though, right? In Stormlight?
It could be. I just don't think it is, because I think that's too easy.
I mean, I guess if we're talking Cosmere spoiler for this book, though, the most overt one is the ramen shop lady.
Yeah, design.
With
being a cryptic. I was telling Sean, I'm like, she's a cryptic, like pattern, and he's like, design and pattern, and I'm like, well, yeah.
Well, so when I started reading Yumi, I was visiting Joanna in Luxembourg, and she was working, and I was just sat there reading it, and design was introduced, and I just went, hang on, because I just like doubted myself for a moment. I was like, is that? So I got up and got her copy of Rhythm of War and looked, and I was like, oh my god, it is!
Yeah, I thought she was funny too. I like that she is the Spren that he got. You know what I mean? Like, she's very like, whatever, Hoyd, like, you're just gonna be this coat rack. And she puts like the crown on him and stuff.
You're gonna be a coat rack now.
Yes, I love how she I feel like if anybody is going to be constantly attached to Hoyd, I like that it's somebody who doesn't seem that concerned about him. what about other Cosmere spoilers that we get in this one? I'm sure there's going to be something that when we're done, we're going to be like, how did we forget to not talk about this? But was there anything else that we wanted to touch on Cosmere-wise? No. I just want to know the timeline. I want to know the timeline of everything. I want to know how everything relates to everything else. Jesse, I think your audio is cut out because I don't see that you're, unless you muted yourself. But I don't think on my end I see that you're muted.
I'm really glad you mentioned that though, Sophia, really, because I really thought the same as you did.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that
just
makes me feel
don't trust him
stupid.
anymore.
No. I mean, it could totally be true. I mean, this is
It could
probably me
be.
and this is probably me
Yeah.
and Sophia just thinking, nah, this is not
Yeah.
that easy. Yeah.
Like the same thing with like when I thought, what she's obviously not from the Star Sun, whatever thing. It's too easy for it to be Sanderson. That's I just approach Sanderson books now with much skepticism.
Yeah.
Of the first or easiest answer is not the right one.
Yeah, exactly, right?
He's gonna end up writing something where it's gonna be the most obvious thing, and none of us will believe it because we're like, well,
Oh,
surely
that's what
not.
he always does. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
will be fun.
like Mistborn. I
The
still
thing-
can't believe I didn't pick up on that.
I think the
How?
thing with that ending, with that Rhythm of War ending, is because I kept on thinking that this could not be it. Is because this is right now one of the most argued theory in the Stormlight Archive community is that Hoyt is purposefully misleading Odium, right? So I don't think he will just say, yeah, he lost his memory there. That's my thoughts on it. But who
Yeah,
knows, until
I
we see
kind
it, it could
Yeah,
happen.
the other thing that I think is maybe he's seen that we're all speculating about this and he's put it into Yumi to put it to bed. But I'm like, I just don't... Yeah, I'm still unconvinced, basically.
Yeah.
I am just getting anxious thinking about Starbucks 5. That's all. I'm like, I don't want anything to happen to some of them. Some of them I don't care as much about. But
Yeah. I wonder who.
I wonder who.
I feel bad, but Jesse, do you want to say something to see if the audio is still not working for you? Yeah, I don't know why it's not working.
It doesn't work. No idea what.
Patrick, no, it doesn't work. I don't know if there was a whole lot else though that I wanted to say, and I don't know if anybody else had anything to add, because I think Jesse, it's a good time for your audio to not work is what I'm trying to say, because I don't know that we have a whole lot left to discuss. Was there anything else anybody wanted to mention before we wrap it up? Where is it ranked? This will be the last thing. What's been your favorite secret project? Jesse, you can just hold up a finger. 1, 2, or 3. Which one's been your favorite? So what is it? 1 and 3 are tied. Okay. Sophia, what about for you?
Yeah, I think I like this one the best. But I did like Tress too, but I think this is my favorite.
Roger.
2.
Yeah, I don't know.
2. Who go?
I think it's still Tress for me, but also I was reading Yumi at a weird point when I was moving and had a lot of other stress, and it took me like 2 weeks to read. So I want to reread it because I also saw that my library has the audiobook, so I'm tempted to like immersion read it now that I have the physical and the audio. I don't know. We'll see.
Mine's definitely Yumi.
Mine is Yumi for sure.
Definitely Yumi. Yay. I just loved it so much. And when it first started, I was like, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it immediately, but then it just really grew on me as it went. Whereas I think Tress, I always enjoyed Tress, but it never got to a point where I feel like I was loving it more and more and more. It just kind of like stayed in this, this is so cute and fun and adventurous. And this one just kind of kept building for me. So I loved it. I want more fantasy like this. I think that's another thing, is it has such a uniqueness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That I want. It's unique and nostalgic feeling at the same time because of the tropes that it falls on and all that stuff, which we discussed in depth. But anyway, this was super fun. I was so excited to talk about this one, but I'm like, I can't talk to anybody about it until our discussion because I wanted to wait until now. But I was really, really, I was going to be so sad if everybody's like, it wasn't very good. I was going to be devastated. So I'm glad that we all kind of at least enjoyed it. it would seem. I don't think anybody really was like, oh, I don't like this one. But I am curious to see for anybody that watches this later, what were your thoughts on this? And if you do want to mention Cosmere spoilers, just make sure to write Cosmere spoilers in your comment and then enter so that people that don't want to see those don't get spoiled. But thanks everybody for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day and we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.